the most horrible thing I remember about my entire war experience was Nordhausen.
I think you have some pictures of that. Maybe you could tell us about, describe these pictures here.
Well, as you can see in the pictures, there's an enormous number of dead bodies lying there. And like I mentioned earlier, they had all been shot dead. In the foreground are some of the people from the town that are starting to take the bodies away.
And they're shot from the rear?
Yes, they were all shot in the back of the head.
Now, who took these pictures?
I took these pictures with a baby brownie camera that I had in my duffel bag at the time.
And you showed these pictures when you came back to the States? Did people believe that such things happen?
Well, by then everyone believed that this was a close-up I took of one of the bodies being removed for burial. As you can see, they were quite skeletal at the time that they were killed. It's very unlikely that many would have lived had they not been shot, but I'm sure that a number would have.
2,000, over 2,000.
About 2,400 to 2,600.
Were there, the Germans kept meticulous records. Were there books with their names in them?
I never found out about that, because we had to move on, and there were others that came along.
How long did you actually stay here?
24 hours,
you made an impression
maybe 30 hours.
For the rest of your life?
Yes, indeed.
And what's happening? Oh, these are more pictures.
There, you can see some of my buddies as well. And as a matter of fact, I don't see any of the townspeople in this picture.
You know, in other pictures that we see in concentration camps, we see naked bodies where people have died or have been taken out of the crematorium, but it's obvious that these people were clothed and just shot.
Yes, these people were mostly dressed.
These are the townspeople?
These are the townspeople. And I guess the pictures speak for themselves. There's not too much more I can say about it.
I guess they do. So from Nordhausen, where did you and your unit go?
From Nordhausen, we continued east. We were trying to hook up with the Russian troops, which we knew were coming from the west. And on a small creek, we met the first Russian infantry troops.
How much later was this? Was this still in April?
This might have been about 10 days or 12 days later. And that was quite a happy reunion, because for at least our outfit, the war was over. Officially, I believe it ended 2 or 3 days later.
And how did that affect you? What did you do after that, you
and
your unit?
Our unit stayed in this village called Grima.
Oh, that was the little circle on the map
yes,
that you...
for about 2 weeks. But one of the happy parts of this reunion was that we came across a group of Czechoslovakian women in one building and a group of Polish women in another building who had been walked back and forth for about 3 weeks between the Russian soldiers coming from the east and the American soldiers coming from the west. And they had been surviving on grass.
They had been walked back and forth by their Nazi guards.
By the Nazi guards, exactly. But before we came into Grima, the night before, the guards had all disappeared and left these women untouched. And that was quite an emotional experience. They had many stories to tell.
Now, how did you communicate with them?
At that time, in my company of 200 men, I was the only Jewish person. And one of my officers came to me and asked if I could help interpret, because all of these people spoke Jewish, Yiddish.
Oh, they spoke Yiddish?
Yes.
And you knew Yiddish?
And he thought maybe I would be able to converse with them, and I was able to get along. Not too easily, but
So you took down their stories, or how did you help them?
Well, they all asked me to write to relatives that they had all over the world. And I sent out over 70 letters all over the world for these people, to brothers, husbands, family. And
were they all Jewish, all these women?
all of these women, all of the Polish women were Jewish, and about 95% of the Czechoslovakian women were Jewish.
And what condition were they in?
The Czechoslovakian women were in fair condition, and the Polish women were in very poor condition.
So they had been in the camps for a longer time, I presume.
I was never sure how that worked out. It was, or if I did know who was in the camp longer, I don't recall.
There's a story about a reunion. Perhaps you would tell us the story about the two women that you helped.
Oh yes, among the Czechoslovakian women, there were two young women there, ages 16 and 18. And I remember their names were Sonia and Terry. And when they were giving me an address to write to, the address they gave me was Taunton Avenue, or is it Street, here in Buffalo. And it was addressed to their relatives named Firestein. And I remembered playing football with their cousin Sam Firestein. And it was very hair-raising when they gave me an address in my own city, and especially with people that I knew. And I wrote to them. I wrote to the people in Buffalo. And I also told them that the two cousins did not want to be trucked off to the American zone, even though they knew the Russians were going to occupy that part at the time. And I advised them not to go back to Prague to look for their relatives, because the situation wasn't safe for a lot of reasons. And they said that they just couldn't consider not going back to Prague. They had to find out if their mother and father were alive, or if any of their relatives were alive. And I wrote this letter to the Firesteins in Buffalo. And the Firesteins wrote to a cousin of theirs who was in the American Army, also in Europe, who had come over to the States only 5 years earlier from Czechoslovakia and knew the language.
And he knew the girls?
Well, they were his cousins.
Oh, that's
yes.
right, of course.
And I met him later in Buffalo. He told me that he received mail from Buffalo that his cousins were alive and had gone back to Prague, and he went AWOL, absent without leave, and decided to go into the Russian zone and find his way back to Prague to see if he could at least locate the girls that I wrote about, as well as his own family. And he found Terry and Sonia, and also found that every other relative had been killed in concentration camps. There were no other survivors.